And I get to Spalding. My wife was 8 months pregnant with my second son. So this was already like kind of an insane thing that I was doing based on how pregnant she was. I get to the top of Spalding and then I figure out the road, like how I got misled. And I look back to my right and I go, there's Evans over there, which would have been from where I was easy. It would have been easy for me to do and shorter too.
Yeah.
And I sound like an idiot with this because like how can you get lost on a mountain at the top? And somehow I figured it out. And then I had a really tough choice to make because I could have done it. I had plenty of energy. I was in good shape, but it would have pushed my arrival back home with my 8-month pregnant wife another like 2.5 hours. You know how that goes sometimes. It's like,
yeah, you don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that.
So I just was like, you suck, Mount Evans. And
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach buys new Gators. I go north when I should be going south. And we sit down and chat with Colorado sports talk legend, Darren DMac McKee. Zach, how are you doing today, my friend?
Oh, doing great, Eric. I'm excited to have Darren on the podcast today. So much fun to chat with. I'm not sure whether to call him Darren or DMac. I feel weird calling him DMac. I feel like I'm calling into a sports show. Like, first time, long time, Darren.
Yeah, exactly.
Just really excited to have him on the show today. It's really cool that Eric finds these people and books them. I'm just along for the ride. So it was really great that you did that. I do have to say, though, I had some audio difficulties. I have an old Samson mic that decided to breathe its last gasp right in the middle of our interview with DMac. Of course. And there was like echoes and all kinds of stuff. And you'll notice he's like telling his Mount Everest story. And then like you won't hear me for about 6 or 7 minutes. That is me frantically resetting my computer and throwing a Samson mic against a wall and then starting over again. So,
you hit that well during the recording.
Well, Mike was off and I was off the call, so
yeah, there you
couldn't
go.
see it or hear it. So yeah, how are you doing today, Eric?
I'm good. Yeah, we had a ton of fun with DMac. So I have to say, I've been listening to him since 2010. Literally, he's been on Denver
through
Sports
multiple
Radio.
of his firings and rehirings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think in that time, he's been in Denver the entire time, that time frame at least. Yeah, it was just, he's mentioned before multiple times his love for 14ers. And so when you and I started our podcast, one thing that was always in the back of my mind was, well, maybe we'll get a chance to talk with DMac. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And he has this thing where it's almost kind of infamous. He will give out his cell phone number, his personal cell phone, on the air. And so the first time I heard him say it, I heard his area code and the exchange, but I missed the last four because like he does it kind of unannounced and kind of on like a low voice and does it really fast. So I kind of missed the last 4 digits of his phone number. So I'm like, doggone it. I'd be like ears attentive for his cell phone number. And then he did it again. And so then at that point I texted him and like an hour and a half later, he's like, yeah, I'd love to come on the podcast with you guys. So I thought, that's great. I wasn't sure what to expect, but yeah, he was a blast. That was a great conversation. He had lots of fun stories to tell.
You can tell the dude tells stories for a living. Right?
Oh, for sure.
You can tell he knows how to talk for a living because we could have kept going. This will be a 2-part episode, but he could have kept going.
Oh, for sure. And I'd love to catch up with him again in the future if he's open to it, because he's always got adventures going on, and he'll share lots of his stories here. One thing that I noticed in listening back to our recording is I didn't notice while we were talking with him just how many different 14ers he name drops.
Yeah.
Like he goes through the list. And so I want to challenge our listeners, like, count up how many different 14ers he mentions, because I lost track at a certain number. He had so many adventures, so many successful summits. I think our listeners should try to keep a tally of all of the individual 14ers he name checks here.
Yeah, and one other thing they may notice, at some point Darren asks, can I swear on your podcast? And we've never really discussed it before. We try not to swear so that, like, my kid listens to this and it's not like she hasn't heard me swear before. Although I try to keep that to a minimum. And I know your kids listen to it too. So
Yep.
we try not to. And I think Darren did his best, but there were times where Darren may have thrown in an expletive or two. So just know that probably was that some of that was in the original. So
Yep.
yeah, I really enjoyed talking to Darren. That was a lot of fun, and you can tell in this episode we get into a lot of his 14er experiences, and near the end of this he's going to talk about Chicago Basin, and I think that's starting to put the pressure on, Eric. I think we need to do that this year or next. Maybe this year we do
about that a lot. Yeah.
Backpacker to the San Juans, and then next year we go all in. So
there you go. I like it. Well, enjoy. Well, we're here with Colorado sports talk mainstay and 14er enthusiast, Darren DMac McKee. DMac, welcome to the Greens and Blues podcast.
It's great to be on with you guys. It's an itch that I love scratching, climbing 14ers. So it's I love it. I love talking about it. Very rarely does anybody want to hear about it, but I love talking about it. I'll talk about it all day.
Awesome. Well, you're in the right place because we're ready to listen to all the stories that you've got. So if we start at the beginning, like Zach and I, you grew up outside of Colorado. So do you want to dig into where you're from originally and how you made your way out here?
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts as a kid, and on the water specifically, but we were always a big ski family. And in third grade, my dad had a bit of a midlife crisis, and we moved out to Steamboat Springs. So I did spend my third grade year where the Broncos went to the Super Bowl for the first time, Orange Crush and all that. They lost to the Cowboys. Our family, like at Steamboat, if you didn't work on the mountain or in a coal mine in Craig, you probably didn't have a job. And but Steamboat was a radically different looking place in 1977. It really was a cowboy town back then, not like it is now. My folks just kind of ran out of money, and instead of the South Shore Hingham, which is down south of Boston, we moved to the North Shore Ipswich, and that's where I went from 10 to 18. But despite being on the water, I think my heart's always been in the mountains.
Interesting. Okay, so from Boston, you attend broadcasting school in Syracuse, right? At Syracuse University?
That's right. Okay. Yeah, went to Syracuse, met my wife there. That whole thing, I started radio there, that whole thing,
And then when did you make your way out west?
I went from Syracuse to Buffalo and then worked for a very short period of time in Washington, D.C. And at the time, I had options between Boston, Atlanta, and Denver. It was coming out to Denver on a job interview, and I was on the air at KBPI for a few days, and there was a weekend in between, and I went skiing at Vail. It's not that I hadn't been skiing in Colorado before, but it's like when I was a little kid. And just being back in Colorado and skiing at Vail and just sort of being amongst the mountains, it made the choice easy for me, frankly, which is weird because, I always dreamed that I would be on radio in Boston, and Atlanta is a great city too. So I made a tough choice because all my family was back in Boston. I had a very good job offer there too, but I took the job at KBPI, and that was in 1999. I haven't looked back since.
Wow. So you've been here 25 years then?
Yes.
Plus.
Yep. Love every second of it. I'll work it as a greeter in Walmart before I leave Colorado.
Yeah. I think
there's nothing wrong with that.
I feel the same exact way. You have to kick us out of here kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
I got to ask, so growing up in Boston, did you grow up a Patriots fan?
Yeah. But that's out of my blood. I was in Buffalo. I was in Buffalo and went to 50 straight Bills games sitting in the stands, all that craziness you see in Buffalo. Wow. I've experienced it all. We hated the Patriots then. I've covered Super Bowls where they've won and had no emotional tie to them whatsoever. I'm a Broncos fan through and through, and next to the Broncos is actually the Bills. The Patriots aren't even close on the radar.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, Broncos, that comes clear through in your broadcast, but I wasn't sure if the Patriots were on the radar or not.
Nowhere even close. Listen, man. if it's the Patriots against the Eagles, my whole family's from Boston. I'm not rooting for Philadelphia, except for this past weekend, went to beat the Chiefs. But I mean, and my wife's actually from Pennsylvania, so maybe I'd go in that direction. But I have no emotional ties whatsoever to, frankly, any of the Boston teams at this point.
Okay, got it.
It sounds, Darren, like you made a pretty pointed lifestyle decision to come to Colorado and maybe even traded out some professional glory or ambition in order to be in Colorado simply because you love the place. Is that about right?
I think that is fair. And in 2004, now I've been fired a bunch, guys. I don't know about you and your careers, but I've been fired a ton. And in 2004, I was fired from KBPI. And it's funny. I've never done anything wrong to be fired. People just eventually get sick of me. That's probably the easiest way to put it. And some firings are fine and some firings are painful. And in 2004, it was pretty painful. I didn't see it coming. Loved where I was. I knew, though, because I started off as like a music morning show, wild and crazy disc jockey. Although I've covered sports since I was 18 years old, but I kind of made my hay in sort of the outrageous morning show, sort of rock and roll stuff. But I knew that wasn't going to last forever. And I always wanted to get into talk radio one way or the other. In 2004, when I was fired from KBPI, if I was ever going to leave Colorado, that would have been it. Because I really could have got probably a good job somewhere else in the country. Like I told you, I was offered jobs in Atlanta and Boston before I came out here to Colorado. So if I was ever going to go, that was probably it. But my kids were young. They were in school. I was offered a job in Colorado Springs. And I just sort of just sucked it up and hoped someday I would be able to make it back to full-time in Denver. So we never moved. I lived right behind Smoky Hill High School at Smoky Hill and Buckley. Lived there for more than 20 years. So I recently moved this past year after getting fired again. How about that? But that's another story. Yep. And so I commuted back and forth to Colorado Springs for a good chunk of time. And then I finally got hired at the Fan, and that was a good long run until they made some stupid decisions. And now I'm thrilled to be where I am now, working for Altitude and KSE. That's a bit of the radio like life journey. But so I guess there have been a couple of windows where career-wise, if I wanted to work in a bigger market than Denver or maybe a more lucrative style of life, there were some opportunities for me to do that. But I never took it that seriously. And the primary reason, the number one reason, is the state of Colorado and the mountains, frankly. And despite the fact I don't, I live in Lone Tree, not out in the mountains. The mountains are the reason, the number one reason. The outdoors of Colorado is the number one reason why I love Colorado so much.
You can't go wrong. I mean, my wife and I are the same exact way. We moved here, and that's the reason we moved here, and you have to drag us out kicking and screaming if you have to. But
yeah, what I do during the week, listen, I do love covering sports, and I love the vibe of a city. Okay, so don't get me wrong, all that I'm into. But I have found so much peace, tranquility, adventure, just everything in terms of what I truly value. I'm not a religious guy, but I feel like I'm spiritual, and I feel I find that in the mountains. Mm-hmm. It's hard to even explain to somebody who just doesn't do it or isn't into it and hasn't experienced for themselves. So in general, I just keep it to myself. And I do most of my climbing by myself, by the way. Mm-hmm. I've climbed with other people for sure. And I'm not an expert mountaineer whatsoever. I've turned around on plenty of 14ers because I don't think it's worth risking my life. And I've done other things that I look back on. I'm like, whoa, that was probably pretty stupid. And it's not a race for me either. And some turnarounds I have regrets on, like, I probably would have been all right. And other turnarounds, I'm like, no, it wasn't the right thing. It just wasn't happening. I did the right thing. So it's not always about getting to the summit for me. And nor is it about checking a list. I don't have to do all of them to be satisfied. And there's some that I know I'll just never do. There's just no way. I'm just either I don't have the skill or the nerve or a combination of both things. And so that's just not on my list. So
my neck hurts from nodding as much as I have with everything you just said, DMac. I think if you talk to 10 14er enthusiasts, at least 9 or probably 10 are going to agree with most of everything you just said. So
yeah,
glad to hear that.
I think sometimes we put just way too much value on how many peaks you bagged and how you did it and what route you took and all that sort of stuff. And listen, man, it's Colorado. There's always somebody that's going to be doing more than you. I'll never forget.
Sure.
It wasn't my first one, but I did Grays and Tories on a nice weekend. And there was a dude he ran past me twice. He ran past me twice. It's just like, okay.
Going up twice?
He ran past me like as I was going up. I did Grays and then Tories. And so he ran up past me going up Grays. Okay. Then he ran, I'm still going up Grays. He runs down past me. Okay. And then I think I did the saddle, did Tories, and I'm coming down, and he ran past me again as I was like coming down from Tories. It was something crazy like that. So I'm like, okay, you win. You know, I mean, listen, I'll just get to my first story, my first 14er, because I'm sure you're going to ask that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But my first 14er is actually incredibly meaningful and very profound. So I was fascinated when I came out to Colorado. I was in the airport and I saw like a 14er guide. And I'm like, what are these? You know, like it was like a thick book, and I forget exactly what the book was. And this was in 2000 or so. And I just was like fascinated by the whole thing. And the one mountain that really stood out to me was Long's Peak. But when I read about Longs, I was like, oh, I'm not ready for that. Mm-hmm. And my first son, I have two boys. My first son was born in March of 2000. And so that was wonderful being a dad for the first time and buying our house and the whole thing. So in September of 2001, my wife took my younger son, who was just 1.5 years old, back home to visit in Pennsylvania. And I don't know how you guys started 14ers, but I mean, I was obsessing about it in my mind for months. I mean, months I was thinking about it. And it was sort of a secret obsession because my wife, although she loves the outdoors and she skis and that sort of thing, camps, she just didn't have the same sort of feeling I did. And there was something about a 14er that was like a athletic competition. You know, there was like a start, there was a finish, you know, there was something about it rather than just, I'm going to hike 10 miles in the woods and set up a camp. That always that concept sort of bored me, although I have done backpacking in Chicago Basin. Yeah. But the first one, she went away. All right. And I had the weekend to myself, and I was in my early 30s at the time. And so I said, I'm just going to do the easiest one I can find. Right. And that was Quandary. Well, it was September 9th. It was like a Sunday. And we had just had some weird snow. You know how that sometimes happens? Mm-hmm. And I've only done Quandary once. I couldn't really I was so new to all of this. I couldn't find the trailhead, like where I was supposed to go. Mm-hmm. I was like in a neighborhood somewhere outside of Breckenridge. And, you know, Quandary is one of those where it's just like, well, there it is. Yeah, like you like from the bottom, you kind of start on the ridge line, sort of in a weird way. Yeah. Right. Like you're just like after sort of forest, on the ridge the whole way. Yep. And I was like, oh, it's so easy. It's so easy. All I'm reading about is how easy Quandary is. Right. I'm like, oh, there's all this snow. Can I curse on this podcast or not? I won't do it on purpose, but if it slips out, it slips out. So I'm going up there and I'm post-holing like on Quandary. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So all of a sudden, and I don't care how, when you're post-holing, okay, that's a little weird, right? Like, I don't know how deep this is going to go. How deep
exactly.
Yeah. And it's a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a lot of work, and it's not complicated, but it's just like, you got to be kidding me with this. Mm-hmm. And I definitely went up the easiest possible way. And I definitely missed the trailhead, but there are literally neighborhoods where you can park your car and climb up Quandary. I mean, it was way harder than I thought. Way harder than I thought because of the snow. But I get up to the top, and there was this older couple, and there's 2 or 3 different approaches, I think, up Quandary. So I didn't see everybody that was at the summit. And we get up there, and this older couple had a bottle of champagne. No joke. And so this is my first 14er ever. So they had little paper cups, and there's maybe 6 or 7 of us up there, and they poured out a little cup of champagne. And I sat there, and I looked out, and I started crying a little bit. I had a little bit of a tear. Oh, yeah. I was thinking about my wife and my son, how lucky I was to live in Colorado. And it's beautiful up there at 10 Mile Range, Breckenridge, and all that. And it's just awesome. 2 days later, 9/11 happened, and it changed the world. And it was profound to me to have such a peaceful, spiritual, kind of funny, nice little twist with the champagne sort of experience and a sense of accomplishment. Like, well, no matter what I've done in my life, I can always say I climbed a 14er in Colorado. It's like one of those deals.
Yeah.
And then 9/11, and my wife and son were in Pennsylvania. And so just returning to Colorado, like you couldn't get a plane. You couldn't travel back easily. And it was a whole thing. They didn't come back for like a week and a half until finally they took. And, man, if you knew anybody who was traveling or traveling back around then, it was emotional, man.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing. So I'll just never, ever forget the peacefulness and the deep satisfaction I had of that moment also being tied in. And life is so fragile with what happened just a couple days later. So my first 14, there's some that I don't remember all the details. Like I'm quite convinced Mount Antero is the worst 14er on earth. And I can tell you why about that too. I mean, it's just road. And then, it's just nothing bums you out more when a Jeep passes you up the road and you're like, what am I even doing? But most of them that mean quite a bit. And the first one actually means the most, which is wild, right? Like your first one, you would have that sort of profound experience.
Wow. So that's quite a first 14er experience. So not only post-holing in September on one of the air quote easier 14ers in the state, and then, like you said, 2 days later, something so deep and personal to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I was going to ask you, but I think you already answered it, is I was curious so you hike your first 14er, when did you get hooked on hiking 14ers? It sounds like you were hooked on it even before you even set foot on a mountain.
Yeah, because to me, the natural curiosity is what's up there?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look up there? How do you get up there? And the amount of 14ers in the state. And once you start researching it a little bit, you're like, oh, these aren't, too harsh, not too bad, maybe. But I mean, even an easy one to me is somewhat of a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on when you do it and how you do it and how you go about it. I have some Boston Marathon medals back here. So I've run 10 marathons, including a little bit of an ultra in Fort Collins. So I've gone through kind of wild ups and down stages of fitness in my life.
Yeah.
So I actually have run up a 14er. I ran up Lincoln from the backside, from the Route 9 or whatever. There's a couple ways, like you can go to Alma and go to Kite Lake, and that's the traditional way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. But there's another way if you're just like going to focus on Lincoln, that you can do it from like the road. And I'm forgetting exactly what the road is. But I've been in that type of shape where when I was marathon training I just simply ran up Lincoln, and I think it's Bross right there. That's right next to
Bross
it.
is right next to it. Yep.
Right. So I just, over there.
you did that, and then you went down that nasty scree slope that Bross has at the end.
No, because that takes you back to Kite Lake. I just came.
Okay, that's right.
I just literally came up Lincoln, Bross, back to the Lincoln area, and just down because my car was on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I've stayed at Kite Lake, and I've actually done Democrat a couple of times, and Cameron's right there too, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It is. Yes, right next to Democrat.
Yeah, that links to Democrat, correct? Is that right?
It does.
I've done that. Lincoln was, or Democrat was like kind of like tricky, not hard, but like just gotta kind of watch yourself a little bit there on Democrat. Yeah, I'd say that's a good way to put it, right? Like there's, be careful. You gotta. I thought Lincoln was actually from the approach I took. I thought Lincoln there was not much to it, and again I was using it as more of a training thing anyways.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you even count Bross? Is that one of them or not?
It's a nice debate because technically with it being on private land, we're not supposed to summit it, but the skirt around that we're encouraged to take is only, 30 feet from the summit or whatever. So however you want to count it, I count it. But
wait, I didn't know that. So that definitely was not the case back when I did it. Relatively, that was probably more than 20 years ago.
Okay.
So nobody cared back then. I have not done the one that's always needed permission.
Yeah. Culebra, the private one.
I have not done that. So
we haven't either. Yeah.
but I don't think it's that hard to do. So
No.
nor do I find it all that interesting. So I'm not sure.
I'm
not
too
sure.
cheap.
I don't know. I'm not sure it's that big of a deal. My nemesis, I'll tell you my nemesis mountain, the mountain I hate is Mount Evans, which is now Mount Blue Sky, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because it's just not that interesting of a climb to go up it because of the road, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So you can do it, and it certainly doesn't count if you drive up there and then just walk up 600 feet or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That, of course, doesn't count. So check this out. I figured out if I'm going to do this thing, I got to make it a little bit more interesting. So there's the Mount Evans ascent, which is there's a bike ascent and a road race ascent. So I signed up for the Mount Evans ascent, and I was in pretty good shape. For whatever reason, they were holding it in like mid-June. I have no idea why you would hold a road race up a 14er in mid-June.
Oh, man.
And sure enough, the first year, it was unreal. But what happened after the lake? I mean, it is a howling snowstorm, winds. I mean, I'm walking up backwards. I mean, but like you're so close at that point. It's like, well, I'm gonna do it. I mean, I've gone this far, but this is June and it's blinding wind, the whole thing. I am a quarter mile from the finish, and they cancel the race. And they and they do have time cutoffs, but even in those bad weather conditions, I was still gonna make the time cutoff probably by about 20 minutes. I was fine on that, and they were just like, it was too dangerous, and frankly, it was too dangerous. And so a quarter of a mile. I mean, I knew where I was at that point, even in the snowstorm. I'm like, oh, I'm right here.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope, get in the truck. We're out. The race is over. Let's go.
Oh, my
gosh. The next year they did it, and the weather was actually amazing. And I think they pushed it back a little bit. And, I was very proud of that, by the way. It's 14.6 miles uphill. So to me, that was the equivalent of running a marathon, by the way. I count that the same as I would count running some of the marathons. And then I had the ethical dilemma. Does it count if you don't get down? And I fully intended to go down. And they did have support vehicles, and I didn't think that was cheating too much to put some boots or something like for the descent in like a backpack. And I wasn't carrying a backpack. So we're cheating all the way, however you want to count it. And I got to the top, and you know what? I probably could have just come back down. But I was just like bored. You guys ever like you're just freaking bored, and the truck was right there, and I was just so over Mount Evans, and I was just like, forget it. And here's the craziest one: Beardstadt. Okay, so I did Beardstadt the first time before they had all the wooden planks and
the
all
boardwalk,
the
yeah.
Oh, you're one of those.
Yeah,
I was. Well, yeah, it wasn't an option. And Beardstadt without the boardwalk was hard.
That sounds, not fun.
Well, no, it's all slushy,
willows.
It's the willows. It's marshy. It's just permanently wet. Even in August, it was just like terrible. So I did Beardstadt up and down before the boardwalk. Then I figured, all right, if I'm going to do Beardstadt, I'm going to do Beardstadt. And I saw the Sawtooth. I'm like, I think I could do that. No big deal. So I do Beardstadt, no big deal. The boardwalk, the whole thing. Then I'm looking at the Sawtooth, and I'm like, this is interesting.
That's something. Yeah.
And I'm by myself because most of the stuff I do by myself. So I start going, and there was another guy, and he was like right there with me. So I'm like, okay. That kind of inherent, like, hey, we don't know each other, but, looks like we're doing the same,
You clearly have one thing in common, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, maybe this will work, and sure enough, that's kind of what we did. We ended up, kind of unspoken, just sort of doing it. The Sawtooth is, hey, man, dude, there's moments on the Sawtooth that, I don't know, have you guys done the Sawtooth between Beardstadt and Evans?
Nope.
I did, once.
Okay. It gets your attention. And
it's spicy, as they like to say.
Yeah, and there are moments where you get out there, you're safer to just go forward rather than go back. And you can find yourself in these positions, and they're a little scary sometimes when you're in those positions. No ropes, of course, no ropes. I've never used rope ever on any 14er. It's why I've turned around on several. And so being this guy and man, there's some climbing. There's some legitimate, like, definitely 3 points of contact. Definitely like, ooh, I got to do this. I got to do this move, that move. And so we get through some really hairy parts. I'm like, oh, we're bonded for life. And then there's a little bit of a scramble up to the ridge line. And the guy was just a little bit better in shape and quicker than me. That's fine. That happens, right? So he gets up to the ridge line out of sight of me for, I don't know, he's only like 5 minutes ahead of me, not that far. I scramble up to the top of the ridge, and this guy is gone. Like, I don't know where he is. Like, he didn't wait for me. We just went through this like crazy, like bonding sort of moment. And I'm at the top, and I don't know if you guys have ever really been disoriented way up high. And I have the map. But the weird thing about Mount Evans is that road kind of comes up and then it goes down. And it's hard to even describe this. But when you're up there, it's like, which way is further up, to my left or to my right? And I'm looking at one ridge going to my left and one ridge going to my right. I have no idea where that guy went. I mean, that would have been a big help because we were both trying to do the same thing. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to my left. I think that's it. I summited some place called Mount Spalding. I swear to God.
I was just about to say, I know exactly where you went, because that's what I didn't make that mistake, but I've done Evans, Spalding, and Bierstadt, and I'm like, he went to Spalding.
I went to Spalding. I almost cursed there again. And I get to Spalding. My wife was 8 months pregnant with my second son. So this was already like kind of an insane thing that I was doing based on how pregnant she was. I get to the top of Spalding, and then I figure out the road, like how I got misled. And I look back to my right, and I go, there's Evans over there, which would have been, from where I was, easy. It would have been easy for me to do, and shorter too. Yeah. And I sound like an idiot with this, because like, how can you get lost on a mountain at the top? And somehow I figured it out. And then I had a really tough choice to make, because I could have done it. I had plenty of energy. I was in good shape, but it would have pushed my arrival back home with my 8-month pregnant wife another like 2.5 hours. You know how that goes sometimes. It's like,
yeah, you don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that.
So I just was like, you suck, Mount Evans. And and there is a way where you don't have to do the sawtooth. Like if you were to start at Bierstadt and sort of not do the boardwalk and kind of use the willows, there is a way you could actually go up to Spalding and then sum it up. Evans, there is a way to do it. It's just really long, but going down, you save so much time, right? And nobody would really look at it that way anyways. I think you would actually have to start on that road on Guanella Pass and not start at the summit. There's a way to do it. So I officially hate Mount Evans. And because it's not all that interesting, right? And like, I count it. It's good enough. Whatever. That's on the list too. Done. Enough with Mount Evans.
It's one of those, maybe this is one of our upcoming rapid fire questions. Your least favorite mountain experience. Sounds like you've got one right there.
Well, Antero's up there too. Antero was just so stupid, because I know it's a mineral mining prospector.
Aquamarine, yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty up there and the whole thing. But the road, I had no idea. That was bad research on my part. I had no idea the road went so close to the summit. So I just ended up walking up a road. And then, what is it? The last, I don't know, what is it? Quarter mile or whatever. It's like a very light scramble to the summit, something like that. That was just boring. I don't hate Antero, but like I hate Mount Evans. So that's it.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
The spirit wasn't in you for Mount Evans, it sounds like.
No, and it's annoying because like it's different than, to me, Pikes Peak.
Pikes
to me was a really fascinating one, because I always thought, what's it like if you summit a 14er and there's a tourist from Iowa with a donut in his mouth and like a Nirvana t-shirt? And I thought that might take away from the spirit of it,
Yeah, no, you're not having a religious experience at the top of the cog railway on Pikes Peak, right?
But I sort of knew that because I had taken the cog with my kids a long time ago, and I'm at the donut shop, and I'm like, this is wild, man. Like the whole thing about this is pretty crazy. and I saw the tourists, but then I saw somebody who obviously had climbed it. You could just tell, they had the gear and the whole thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's cool right there compared to, all of us. And I just thought it was so hysterical. There was a donut shop with selling, trinkets at the top of 14er. And the summit of Pikes Peak is pretty interesting, don't you think? Because it's so flat and big.
It is. Oh yeah.
It's pretty wild like that. And as I found out later, Long's Peak Summit is kind of similar to that.
Also, like a football field,
which is pretty
there.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So it's stuck in my mind. And again, this is, the bar trail is the most traditional way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I've done the incline, but just the traditional bar up. I guess you could do the incline and then go from there. Give you probably a little bit of a head start, I suppose, if you could just physically do it. But we had a radio bit. I was on a morning show there, and the bit was, could I summit in 7 hours and on the radio Pikes Peak? And I started at 2 a.m. and it was a whole radio bit. And it was really pretty cool because this is back in the early 2000s. And I was on a cell phone basically trying to do it. And I came 13 minutes short. I couldn't quite get there by 9 a.m. But still, I know. But still for me, I thought it was a fun bit. It was a fun way to do it. Listeners were sort of following because I think a lot of people who even live in that area, you see Pikes Peak every single day. Well, how many people really give that a shot? Yeah. And, I wasn't in, I know they do the marathon up there and Dave Carpenter and all that. So for me, 7 hours was, I don't know, man. What is it? It's got to be 14 plus, right?
I think it's right at like 13 miles.
It's right at like a marathon up and down.
Yeah, it's basically a marathon to go up and down. Yeah, if you're doing the bar trail.
But that's not even it, because it's not a complicated hike whatsoever. It's just the degree of elevation in one day, which makes it, it's a epic day. So I really actually, and then when I got to the top, and they got those little switchbacks right to the top, which I think are kind of cool. That's a fun way to sort of, finish it. You got to feel like you're doing a little something. Yep. And you get to the top, and I'm sitting there, and I got my gear, and I'm all dusty. And you bet I went and got a donut. I went right in there, and I had all my gear, and it was a little bit of a, look at me moment.
Yeah.
And there's the guy from Iowa with the Nirvana t-shirt. Or actually, it's not a Nirvana t-shirt. It's just like a grizzly bear. It's just like a huge animal print, like on his tucked in shirt.
You got quite a memory about this dude. He impacted you.
Out.
Well, I know he stands out to me. And it was. I got to tell you guys, it was pretty awesome because I know how he got there, and there were a bunch of tourists there, and I know how I got there, and a very much degree of deliberation when it was time to go that I definitely made sure as people were, and I waited for this on purpose. I waited for a train to be about to depart so they could watch me go over the edge because that is a wild thing to see as well when you have a mode of transportation and you just see somebody walking into the abyss. And I just had a little smile on my face and I just took my time. In fact, I even stopped at bar camp. I was going to sleep over. My whole intent was I'm just going to really take my time. I didn't have a reservation at bar camp, but if you don't have a reservation and there's openings, they don't care, right? Like it's not, and there were some A-frames and some mattresses set up there. And I stopped at bar camp actually for quite a while, but it was like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what am I doing? It was a nice night. I was fine. And so I actually climbed down the final from bar camp to Manitou Springs, actually overnight, like from 2 a.m. to, it was late, something like that. Or maybe I started like at 10 p.m., something like that, to 2 a.m., something like that. But it was really cool, man. Yeah, but, there's a lot of light at that time. You can see quite a bit of Colorado Springs walking down bar camp there. So it didn't feel scary or anything like that. And because there's no light, it's so beautiful on a clear night. The stars, hey, man, see, this is where you get romantic, right, man? Like the stars are your guide. And I had a headlamp, but I don't think I even needed it, frankly. And it turned out to really be another one of those like huge bucket lists. Like, you kind of did that moment doing Pikes Peak. So that was pretty awesome.
That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I want to take a bit of a step back here and kind of go a little more big picture. So you had this passion about 14ers even before you started hiking a 14er, but do you see yourself as more of like I enjoy the journey person, or do you enjoy the destination more? It's probably a combination of both, but which one do you kind of lean towards?
Probably the journey, because I have turned back on several. And like I said, a couple of them kind of eat me up to this day. Mount Princeton, I don't think is a very hard hike, but I was doing it with my son, my older son, who was about 8 or 9 years old. And we just lost the trail a little bit. So we ended up kind of scrambling. It wasn't bad, but it was definitely like harder than it should have been.
Sure.
And we got to the ridgeline. We were close. We were really close. Like it was right there. But he got a little freaked out. And, you know, you have to be sensitive, in my opinion, of those who you're climbing with if you're climbing with people too.
For sure.
And
especially if they're your 9-year-old son.
Yeah.
Time, right?
Yeah. And because we got turned around, you know, I wanted to summit by 11 a.m. just to be safe. And, you know, I was climbing up on 12:30, 1 o'clock. And it's pretty exposed up there on Mount Princeton. It's pretty exposed.
And there's no refuge if something rolls in.
Exactly.
Right. And I realized that. And that was a big part of it. So I was like, oh man, it's right there. And but okay, he was more important. And so I've technically not summited Princeton, but I don't feel like I need to go do it again. Although I had a bit of a romantic thought because my wife and I stayed up in that area just this past weekend. And I was like, that's kind of cool. He's 25 now. He's in unbelievable shape. And that might be kind of a fun thing to do with him again, maybe. You know,
no, it wouldn't. He'd drag you up there kicking and screaming. He'd kill you.
Well, you're right about that. You'd have to give me a significant head start.
He'd be like that guy on the Sawtooth. You'd get to a certain point and be like, where the heck did my son go?
Yeah. Like this summer on my birthday is June 22nd, which is a really interesting time for climbing a 14er. It's a June 22nd, boys. That's like,
It's like a transition period.
Yeah, it could be okay.
It could be great. It could be not.
So I don't even know. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it gets in the back of my mind and it sticks there for whatever reason. It doesn't even make sense sometimes. And that's how I've chosen my list of 14ers for the most part. And it was Mount Harvard. And I can't even tell you why Mount Harvard stuck in my brain to do, but it was there. And I know it's a very long approach, and I read about it, and I'm like, I think it's going to be okay. And I was looking at some things. I'm like, I think I'm good. Like, I got some Solomon trail shoes, and I'm like, I think I'm fine with just these, frankly. And I was for the vast majority of it. And gosh darn it, guys, wouldn't you know, I got right up on the ridge line, and it is a lot of snow. I mean, not a little snow, but a lot. And I'm high up on the mountain. And it's a long day, and I didn't have the right gear. I should have had something on my feet, one way or the other.
Some gaiters.
Yeah, I should definitely have had gaiters because my feet. I definitely should have gaiters. I don't know if I needed anything else except maybe a strong pair of boots with the gaiters. I mean, it would have been nice to have some crampons, I suppose, for a short period of time. If I had crampons and gaiters and just hiking boots, I would have cruised up. Wouldn't have been a big deal. Yeah. And so I was a little mad at myself. I wouldn't have even needed, an ice axe. I hike with hiking poles. I just like hiking with hiking poles, period. I'm a little beat up with my knees from all the stuff I've done over the years. So for me, even on a mild hike, I'd probably use hiking poles. So with hiking poles, crampons, boots, and gaiters, I really would have been okay. I don't know. That one, see, there's one that I want to go do that one again. And I probably want to combine that with, I think it's Columbia.
You want to do that?
Next
That's
to
like
it.
a mini sawtooth between those.
That is a long, it's not near as exposed or committed as the sawtooth is, but it is long.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah, Eric and I, our first peak together was Mount Harvard, and then and we looked over at Columbia, and I remember being like, "No, that's not going to happen." And so then Eric and I came back a year or two later and did Columbia, just kind of on its own. But
what if you did Columbia first? Would that be any easier or same sort of issues?
I don't know now because Colorado 14ers Initiative has put in a pretty good.
Oh, is that
when
right?
Eric and I did it, we just basically walked up a slope, and it was a barn burner. It hurt, but now might be pretty easy. I don't know.
That's interesting.
But that trail's done now for Columbia. They're good with that now.
Okay, it's such a beautiful part of the state, though, guys.
It's
really pretty.
There.
Yep.
My climb up Harvard, it was one of the most beautiful approaches, and it was pretty cool. There's a couple of stream crossings.
Mhm.
That's very romantic, right? Like you got to take your shoes off and stream cross, and it's on my birthday, so I turned 55, and that's another marker, right? I have done a handful of 14ers on my birthday, very much on purpose. I don't know. I'm weird about my birthday. I'd rather be by myself on my birthday in the mountains doing something like that. I can see my family for dinner later. You know what I'm saying? But it's a moment again of the spiritual reflection of who you are and who I am and what I love doing. So I know that might be a little weird to spend your birthday by yourself, but I've done it several times and I enjoy it. I aim to do that. I can't do it every year because of life, but I try to do that on my birthday if I can.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm mostly a good weather hiker.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done a lot of winter sort of stuff, and I try to stay away from the snowfields. And one of the more interesting ones I did with a buddy, I did do this with a pal, and he's a tremendous climber, Scott. We did snowmass from the backside. We did not do the snowfield.
Wow.
Yeah. Look that one up. Snowmass from the backside, and finding that trailhead. Good luck. I mean, is that challenging. But we did it. We found it. And when you get to the ascent, the real ascent, it's 1 mile, boys, straight up. No snow, but it's all kind of loose, bouldery stuff.
It's the Elks. It's crap.
It sounds like an Elky. Yeah.
There's no way to really rope up. I don't think that would help all that much. And it was like, hey, if I sprain an ankle, I am screwed up here. Like, there's not a I don't know how they would. I mean, somebody would have to climb up. I don't know how they would do it. It would be really tricky. And that one, I was close. We were close to the summit, real close. And I just had a wild anxiety attack. Wild. And it kind of hurt my soul. Because my buddy was fine, and he's got no emotional compass at all. He's just a straight up peak bagger. So like he doesn't take a picture, he doesn't take a break. But it's kind of good on an area like that. I was really glad I was with somebody like that. I think it does help when you're doing something tricky to be with somebody who's better than you. Because I think it helps push you a little bit, and they may see a route that you don't see, and especially because the mountains look so much different coming down than going up. So being with him was and having him ahead of me, both up and down, really helped. But it was wild, man. Like, and I won't do that one again because that was a little gnarly, man. No joke. But it is funny because everything you read about snowmass is doing the snowfield, right? Everything you read about it. But there is a way. Look it up. Might be like 3+. Get your attention. It's something. And I just sat on a rock and watched. I watched him. I was that close to the summit. Like I could just watch him. Walk up, tap the rock, come right back down, then pause, then take a photo, nothing, just touch the snow and came back down. So he did that, and this is sort of the whole concept of like, is it about the adventure, the accomplishment?
Yeah.
I did do the Chicago Basin, which was awesome, man. Doing Window Meolis, sunlight up there. That was so cool. And then you get into the tricky things because I think it's sunlight. Like you're there, you're at the top, but it's like a 15-foot, you got a rock climb now. It's up. I don't know. I can't do that. I'm right there and I'm looking at this thing and like, I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me, man. Seriously.
So that presents the ethical conundrum. Do you count that?
I don't know.
Not that you care about a list or not, but like, do you say you actually did it if you didn't?
I don't know. I'm standing right there. I could throw something up there on it.
I could hit a golf ball to the top. That means something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess not, but it's like kind of unfair, man. Like, like I got to become Alex Honnold now.
Right? Exactly.
Like, that one is a good one because we were on a family trip staying in Durango and we took the railroad to Silverton.
Train.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it stops. And I'm like, why is the train stopping? And then there's people that are getting off the train in the middle of nowhere. Like, where are these people going? And I just was like, I want to go with them. Like, where are they going? And the train starts and they go off into the woods. And where are they going? And on that trip, you definitely have to backpack. Well, actually, I take it back. You don't have to. And I ran into a couple and they proved that you didn't. But I'll
you
tell
can
you
go
that,
from Mullis Pass. And that is a long ways.
You can take the train. You can be 20 something years old. You can run up the mountain and run down for the train if you really wanted to. I think you're really missing the point.
It just wouldn't be fun to do it that way.
I mean, like, there's crazy people out there that can, there's mountain goats. But we backpacked into there, and it's about a 6-mile uphill approach.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing to it, and we just got really unlucky. And I do expect it to rain in the afternoon every time on the mountains, but it always stops, right? Not for us, not on that trip.
Yeah.
It was 6 straight hours of a slow drizzle. And and I was with my father-in-law who has Parkinson's. He's a great mountaineer, camper himself, and he was with a buddy from the East Coast, and it got weird. It got super strange because it never stopped raining, and I was with my son, and my 2 sons were there. So they were maybe 10 and 8, something like that. And my wife was there, and she was in really good shape. My father-in-law and his buddy were there. It was weird because it rained so much that I just had to push to a point that we could camp. And there really is no place to camp, but there is a ranger station when you finally get into sort of the camping area of Chicago Basin before you can push ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the kids there, got them settled, and there was a ranger at the campsite. And I had to go back, and my father-in-law just got a little disoriented, and he had just stopped. And very dangerous because of hypothermia and other issues. But when you're down the trail, even though it might be the end might be very, very near, you don't know it. There's no way to tell necessarily. And so, but this was a lucky point in my life. I was in very good shape. So I put the boys with the ranger. Okay, boys, stay here. Told my wife who's behind me, just you'll be fine. Get there. And I went down and I grabbed my father-in-law's pack, and I really kind of said, hey, it's not far. Don't stop here. They were going to set up camp. It was soaking wet. It was very dangerous. And so we finally got him up there. And then, of course, as soon as we get there, what do you think? It's 6 hours of rain, and now it stops. And, no rain.
Yeah, of course.
And we got a fire going. The ranger was great. And then we were fine, self-sufficient. We were in a good campground area. And they just stayed there. And I had so much salt on my shirt, I put it out on a rock to dry off. A goat
and the goats licked it.
Yep, exactly.
A goat ate a big hole in my shirt. It was hysterical. I thought it was hysterical.
Yep.
Those are the most remote 14ers in the state. And Wyndham was another one where there's a real a edge line, sort of a very narrow thing. And it's a little bit gnarly climbing up. And I was like, I don't need that. And Eolis and North Eolis kind of are together, and then Sunlight's right there. And then they have the Spear or whatever on Sunlight. So, but it was beautiful. It was beautiful. But we ran into a couple of kids, younger kids. And sure enough, on the descent on Wyndham, they fell. The kid was bleeding. And they had just tried to do it up and down in a day. And they came past our campsite as they were on their way out, late in the afternoon.
Well, yeah, because they have no gear. They can't stay up there.
They had no gear. They were just young, dumb, and doing dumb things. And they didn't have first aid gear. They didn't have anything. They were just in really, really good shape. But he had said, because on Wyndham, I mean, sometimes it's easier to climb up, right, than climb down.
Yeah.
And they jumped for a rock and they missed it. He's lucky that he's alive, frankly. No joke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
No helmet, no nothing. So I have no regrets about not doing, I'll probably never do Capitol or Castle or even Pyramid. I probably won't do any of those because it's just too much for me. So I enjoy the experience of it. If I can bag it, hey, great, man. I love to see the marker. I love standing on top. Love the whole thing. But if it doesn't happen and I still enjoy the experience, to me, it's a good day or a weekend spent.
Yep.
That concludes this episode's interview with Darren DMac McKee, sports radio legend in Denver. We will be talking to Darren again in the next episode. So this is a 2-part episode. You can always find us at greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com or on our Facebook page. But until then, thanks so much for listening.